In 1943, the United States War Department told families that captured soldiers were being fed according to the Geneva Convention. 3 meals a day, adequate nutrition, nothing to worry about. The truth was so much worse that the Army classified most of the reports until 1950. American prisoners of war survived on meals so desperate that some men lost half their body weight in 6 months. Number 17 on this list was invented by prisoners using nothing but Red Cross scraps and a tin can stove. Number 8 was so revolting that men had to be ordered to eat it by their own officers. And number 3 involved a chemical process that modern nutritionists say may have saved thousands of lives without anyone understanding why. These 25 meals were never meant to be remembered. They were meant to be endured. But here is the part the history books leave out. Some of these survival foods were so effective that military scientists studied them for decades afterward. The emergency rations in your nearest Army surplus store still use principles discovered by starving men in bamboo cages and frozen barracks. Before we begin, subscribe, because what these men ate to stay alive will change how you think about every meal on your table. Let us count down the 25 survival meals that got prisoners of war through World War II. Number 25, grass soup. When the food ran out entirely, men ate what grew under their feet. In camps across Germany and the Pacific, prisoners stripped grass from exercise yards, boiled it in whatever water they could find, and drank the bitter green liquid. A cup of grass soup provided maybe 5 calories, but the warm liquid tricked the stomach into feeling full for 20 or 30 minutes, long enough to fall asleep. In Stalag Luft 3, one lieutenant from Ohio wrote that it tasted like hot lawn clippings mixed with dirt, but it was warm, and warm meant alive. Boiling also killed bacteria in water from questionable sources, preventing dysentery that killed faster than starvation. Guards kicked the pots over for sport. The men would wait and boil another batch. That green broth, worthless by every nutritional measure, kept men going when there was nothing else to go on. Number 24, sawdust bread. German military bread issued to prisoners, called Kriegsbrot, bore almost no resemblance to actual bread. By 1944, as Allied bombing destroyed supply lines, the flour was cut with sawdust, ground tree bark, and potato starch until the loaf was more filler than food. A daily ration was 1/7 of a loaf, sometimes just a 2-inch slice per man. The texture was dense and gritty, the taste sour, almost chemical. Men described feeling wood fibers catch between their teeth. Yet that single slice became the most important moment of the day. Prisoners in Stalag 7A held their portion for hours, eating it crumb by crumb. Some dried their slice near the stove, believing toasted sawdust bread was easier to digest. A slice weighed roughly 3 ounces and delivered around 200 calories. That was breakfast, lunch, and dinner on the worst days. Others crumbled it into hot water to create a kind of porridge that went down easier than chewing through the grit. The sour smell of Kriegsbrot became the smell of morning in every German Stalag, as familiar and as hated as the guard whistles at dawn. Number 23, barley water. In Japanese camps across Southeast Asia, barley water was served as a meal in itself. Guards boiled a handful of barley in a large pot of water, producing a thin, cloudy liquid that tasted like slightly stale grain. Thousands of Americans captured after the fall of Bataan and Corregidor in 1942 survived on this for weeks at a time. A single ladle held maybe 40 calories. The barley settled at the bottom, and prisoners learned to stir before ladling because whoever got the dregs got the only substance in the pot. Fights broke out over bottom servings. Officers established rotations to keep order. The cruel efficiency of barley water was that it provided just enough to keep a man conscious, but never enough to stop the grinding hunger that defined every waking hour. Number 22nd, rotten fish heads. On the Burma-Thailand Railway, where over 12,000 Allied prisoners died building a rail line through the jungle, the protein ration was often a bucket of decomposing fish heads dumped into boiling water. The eyes were clouded, the flesh fell from the skulls, and the smell made men gag before the pot was heated. But the bones released calcium and trace minerals, and the scraps of flesh provided the only animal protein some prisoners saw for months. Medical officers documented that men who refused the soup deteriorated faster than those who forced it down. The broth was thin, gray, and tasted of rot and salt. In starvation, disgust was a luxury no one could afford. Some men plugged their noses and swallowed. Others mixed it with rice to mask the flavor. The ones who survived learned that the body does not care about presentation. It cares about staying alive. Number 21st, weevil rice. White rice crawling with weevils became the staple across Pacific theater camps. At first, men spent hours picking out the beetles. Within weeks, most stopped trying. The weevils were protein. A handful of infested rice delivered more nutrition than clean rice, and the men who understood this survived in greater numbers. In Cabanatuan prison camp, where thousands were held after the Bataan Death March, prisoners called the weevils meat and welcomed their presence. That simple shift, treating insects as food rather than contamination, marked the difference between men who wasted away and men who held on. Boiled into a sticky, grayish mass and served twice daily, weevil rice provided roughly 400 calories per serving. It tasted bland, slightly musty, with an occasional crunch that men learned to ignore. After a few months, nobody flinched. Number 20, turnip soup. German camps served turnip soup with a regularity that bordered on psychological torture. Day after day, the same watery broth with chunks of half-rotten turnip floating in gray liquid. The turnips were woody, often frozen, sometimes black with rot. A bowl delivered perhaps 120 calories. Prisoners in Stalag Luft reported that the smell of turnips cooking triggered nausea in men who had once eaten eagerly. Yet refusal meant nothing in the stomach at all. Medical officers recorded that turnip soup, despite its monotony, provided enough vitamin C to slow scurvy in camps where fruit was non-existent. Number 19, dried seaweed broth. In Japanese camps, dried seaweed tossed into boiling water served as soup. Americans who had never encountered seaweed recoiled at the texture. It stuck to teeth and slid down the throat like something alive. One Army medic from Wake Island described it as swallowing warm, salted rubber bands. But seaweed was dense with iodine, iron, and B vitamins. Prisoners who ate it regularly showed slower rates of beriberi, the thiamine deficiency that crippled and killed thousands. Most men did not know why it helped. They only knew that the ones who gagged it down kept their strength longer. First pattern break. The Red Cross parcel was the single greatest factor in prisoner survival across Europe. Each weighed about 11 pounds and contained canned meat, powdered milk, chocolate, cigarettes, cheese, crackers, and coffee. When parcels arrived, mortality rates dropped dramatically. But parcels came irregularly. Some camps went months without a delivery. Guards pilfered them, puncturing cans so food could not be stored. One parcel was meant for one man for 1 week. By late 1944, one parcel was split among 4, 6, sometimes 8 men. Everything that follows exists in the shadow of the Red Cross parcel, the razor-thin margin between slow starvation and bare survival. Number 17. Spam and cracker sandwiches. The 12-ounce tin of Spam in a Red Cross parcel was worth more than money. Each tin provided roughly 1,080 calories. Prisoners carved slices so thin you could see through them, laying each on a hardtack cracker with jeweler's precision. In Stalag Luft III, men divided one tin among four, each receiving 3 or 4 slices. The salty, fatty taste of processed pork was so overwhelming after weeks of turnip soup that some men wept. Spam was proof that someone outside the wire still cared. The empty tins became cooking vessels, cups, and the blower stoves that would transform camp cooking entirely. Number 16. Klim powdered milk. Klim, Borden's powdered whole milk, became one of the most versatile survival foods in any camp. The name was milk spelled backward. Mixed with water, it delivered calcium, protein, and fat. Men stirred it into ersatz coffee, mixed it into rice for crude pudding, and dissolved it in hot water as a bedtime drink. But the empty Klim tins became the most valuable material in camp. Prisoners hammered them into cookpots, water containers, and blower stoves that burned hot enough to cook on. An entire underground economy was built on Klim tins. The milk kept men alive. The tin kept them civilized. Number 15. Potato peel stew. When Germans peeled potatoes for their own meals, prisoners collected every scrap. Peels were gathered from the mud, washed, and boiled into a thick stew. In camps across Bavaria, this became an organized operation. Kitchen detail prisoners smuggled peels in pockets, inside shirts, and stuffed them into boots. A bowl provided 60 to 80 calories and enough starch to keep muscles functioning for another day of forced labor. It was theft, technically. Men were beaten for it. They did it anyway. The taste was gritty and bland, with an occasional earthy sweetness where the potato flesh still clung to the skin. It was survival scraped from the dirt, literally, and it kept working muscles moving when German rations alone would have let them fail. Number 14. Soybean paste soup. In Japanese camps, dark, pungent soybean paste occasionally appeared in rations. For American prisoners, the first encounter was jarring. It smelled fermented, looked like brown mud, and tasted intensely salty, with an undertone most men could not identify. It was umami, a word that would not enter American vocabulary for 50 years. But miso was extraordinarily nutrient-dense. A tablespoon dissolved in hot water produced a broth containing protein, B vitamins, and beneficial bacteria. Camp medical officers noted improved resistance to intestinal infections. Some men traded their miso for extra rice, not understanding its value. The ones who drank it carried an invisible advantage that compounded over months. Number 13. Combine was the name prisoners gave to pooling every scrap from individual Red Cross parcels into one communal pot. One man's cheese, another's Spam, a third's crackers and raisins, all mixed into stew or baked into a crude casserole. The genius was nutritional completeness. No single parcel item provided balanced nutrition, but combined, the proteins, fats, and vitamins approached something a body could sustain itself on. Groups of 4 to 6 men formed permanent combine teams. After the war, veterans published combined cookbooks as memorials. The food was crude. The cooperation it required was anything but. Some combines were savory, thick with canned meat and cheese. Others were sweet, dominated by chocolate and powdered milk. The taste changed every time, but the principle stayed constant. Together, men could eat what alone they could not survive on. Number 12. Nettle soup. In spring, prisoners harvested nettles from around camp perimeters with wrapped rags. Boiled for 15 minutes, the stinging leaves released a broth rich in iron, calcium, and vitamins A and C. In Oflag 4C, at Colditz Castle, prisoners maintained a guarded patch of nettles like a kitchen garden. Medical officers documented reduced anemia symptoms. A bowl provided minimal calories, but the micronutrients were worth far more than the energy content suggested. Men who knew foraging became invaluable, identifying dandelion greens, clover, and wild garlic from what grew in the cracks of captivity. Number 11. D-ration emergency chocolate. The Hershey D-bar was designed to taste terrible on purpose. The War Department specified it should taste only slightly better than a boiled potato, preventing soldiers from eating emergency rations as snacks. The 4-ounce bar was dense, waxy, and had to be shaved with a knife. It delivered 600 calories. Prisoners shaved curls into hot water for chocolate drinks that warmed the body and flooded the brain with sugar. Some dissolved a quarter bar into clim milk for a beverage so rich it caused stomach cramps. Each shaving was concentrated survival that could carry a man through 2 days if he was careful. Second pattern break. The blower stove changed everything. Built from a clim tin with holes punched in the bottom, set over a smaller tin that acted as a bellows, it burned wood shavings hot enough to boil water in minutes. Before the blower, prisoners ate food cold or raw. After it, they could cook. Boiling killed parasites. Heat made food digestible. Combining ingredients created meals from scraps, inedible alone. The psychological impact was immeasurable. Cooking felt human. Men gathered around blower stoves the way families gathered around kitchen tables. And for a few minutes, the war felt further away. Number 9. Rat meat. When starvation was at its worst, prisoners hunted rats. In camps across both theaters, rats were trapped, skinned, and roasted over blower stoves. The meat was big and stringy and tasted like gamey squirrel. Men who had hunted small game taught others to set snares from wire and string. In Cabanatuan, rat hunting became organized. The psychological barrier was enormous. Many refused entirely. Others ate in silence and never spoke of it. One army surgeon noted that men who ate rat survived at nearly twice the rate of those who would not. A single large rat could provide enough protein for 2 men. The psychological barrier was real, but so was the math. Protein meant muscle. Muscle meant movement. Movement meant 1 more day. Number 8. Blood soup. In the most extreme conditions, particularly on the Thai-Burma Railway, prisoners consumed soup made from the blood of animals slaughtered for guards' meals. Blood was collected in buckets and boiled into a thick, dark broth. The taste was metallic, the texture coated the mouth. Many had to be ordered by senior officers to consume it. But blood is extraordinarily nutrient-dense. A single cup delivered significant iron, protein, and sodium. Medical officers enforced consumption as a directive, knowing the iron alone could slow the anemia that was killing men around them. Blood soup existed in the margins, in the desperate space between what was given and what was needed. It was never recorded in official rations, and it never appeared in any report. But it kept hearts beating when nothing else could. Number 7. Rice polishings. The bran stripped from white rice during milling may have saved more lives in Pacific camps than any medicine. When medical officers realized beriberi was caused by polished rice, they begged Japanese authorities for the discarded bran. More often, it was smuggled by prisoners on work details. Mixed into rice, the polishings delivered concentrated B vitamins that reversed early beriberi symptoms within days. Men losing feeling in their legs, whose hearts were swelling with fluid, began recovering after a week. This was not folk medicine. This was biochemistry discovered under duress, proven in dying men, and confirmed by researchers for decades afterward. The taste was nutty and slightly bitter, with a texture like wet sand. Men choked it down because the alternative was legs that stopped working and a heart that swelled until it quit. Number 6. Dandelion green salad. Prisoners in European camps foraged dandelion greens from every patch of unguarded earth. The bitter leaves provided vitamins A, C, and K in quantities no ration could match. Men crawled along fence lines, scraping greens from between barracks foundations. City men had to be taught by farm boys. Informal classes spread through camps like contraband. By summer, the competition for dandelion patches was as fierce as the competition for parcels. That bitter mouthful of green, pulled from frozen ground and boiled in a clim tin, carried more vitamins than a week of German rations. The earth itself was feeding them when no one else would. Number 5. Prune whip. Red Cross parcels occasionally contained prunes. Soaked until soft, mashed, and whipped with clim, milk, and sugar, they became a mousse called prune whip. Sweet, tangy, and impossibly rich, given the ingredients. But its greatest value was morale. In the grinding monotony of captivity, prune whip was a celebration. Men saved prunes for days, pooling them for birthdays and holidays. It was proof that even in a prison camp, men could create something worth savoring. A single serving delivered fiber, iron, potassium, and natural sugars that provided quick energy. But the calories were almost beside the point. Prune whip was an act of defiance against the grayness. It said that pleasure still mattered, that men who could still taste sweetness were still men. Number 4. Bully beef hash. Canned corned beef from Red Cross parcels, called bully beef, became the most reliable hot meal in European camps. Diced with potato peel and fried on a blower stove in its own fat, it tasted almost like real food. The salty, beefy flavor was so intense after months of thin soup that men rationed each bite. The animal fat provided sustained energy. Carbohydrates could not match. Veterans recalled decades later that the smell of corned beef frying on a blower stove was the smell of hope. A single 12-ounce tin split among 4 men could produce enough hash to fill a mess tin each, especially when bulked with breadcrumbs or crushed crackers. It was the closest thing to a real supper that barbed wire allowed. Prisoners discovered that water left sitting on cooked rice for a day developed a sour taste and a cloudy appearance. What they did not know was that natural fermentation was producing lactic acid bacteria and trace B vitamins. Medical officers noticed that prisoners drinking the sour water showed lower infection rates and better thiamine levels. The practice spread quietly through camps in the Philippines, Thailand, and Japan. Modern science has confirmed that lactofermentation of rice water produces beneficial bacteria and increases bioavailable B vitamins. Starving men stumbled onto a biochemical process that probiotic companies now charge $30 a bottle to replicate. The taste was mildly sour and starchy, like a thin, flat beer without the alcohol. Men drank it warm or at room temperature whenever fresh water was too risky. They just lived. Number 2. Quan. Quan was the legendary all-in-one survival dish of American POW camps in the Pacific. The name described any stew made by throwing every available ingredient into a single pot. Rice, vegetable scraps, fish bones, wild greens, snail shells, stolen sweet potato, a sliver of Spam if God was generous. No two batches tasted the same, but the principle never changed. Combine everything, waste nothing, extract every calorie from every source. In Cabanatuan and Bilibid, Quan was a daily communal ritual. Men contributed whatever they had found, stolen, or foraged into the communal pot. The act of making Quan was as important as eating it. It required trust, cooperation, and the shared belief that tomorrow was worth surviving for. After the war, veterans could not hear the word Quan without falling silent. It meant everything. It meant alive. Number 1. The last Red Cross parcel meal. The most important survival meal of the war was not a recipe. It was a moment. When parcels finally arrived after months of starvation, and a man sat with his combine group around a blower stove loaded with Spam, crackers, cheese, Klim powdered milk, chocolate, and real coffee, something happened beyond nutrition. The first sip of real coffee was bitter, hot, and unmistakably American. The first full bite of cheese was sharp and impossibly rich. The first square of chocolate melted on a tongue that had forgotten sweetness. Tears were common. Silence was more common. The calories mattered. The protein mattered. But what mattered most was the proof that the world outside the wire still existed and still remembered them. 11 pounds. Enough for one man for 1 week. For those who received it after months of grass soup and sawdust bread, it was the meal that kept them human. Men ate slowly, not from discipline but from disbelief. Some could not finish. Stomachs shrunken by months of deprivation rejected the richness. Others ate everything and spent the night sick, their bodies overwhelmed by abundance after so long with nothing. But the next morning they stood a little straighter, their eyes focused a little sharper, and for the first time in months, the future felt like something other than a slow disappearance. Every meal on this list was eaten under conditions most of us cannot imagine. These were not recipes. They were acts of defiance. Each one said the same thing. Not yet. Not today. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and remember what these men survived every time you sit down at your table.